over to you, Shannon, for the report of our General Presbyter.
Thanks, moderator. Erica's going to bring up a brief PowerPoint for me for today, and then we'll get started. Great, thank you, Erica. So it's good to be here. It's good to see all of you. We have gone now a full calendar year. COVID keeps giving us new and more things to say that are new for us. We've now gone a full calendar year of having only virtual meetings for all of 2021. We had one in-person meeting in 2020, which was a few days before everything shut down. We are continuing to discuss this at the roundtable, and as you see in the roundtable report, there's a meeting schedule laid out for the new year, and we anticipate and are praying that our first in-person meeting of this body, the Presbytery, will be at our annual meeting in May. As we had been thinking about Presbytery meetings kind of post-pandemic, which still seems like a weird thing to say, we recognized that the February meetings have always been a problem for PS&E for years because of winter weather. So we were always going to bank on February being a virtual meeting going forward because we assume the weather will always disappoint us in February. So, so I'm looking forward to being with you. Our committees and teams have been doing excellent work, and it's been a good year, I think, in 2021. We've been juggling a whole lot of things and doing a whole bunch of things, but continuing to really work hard to do the work in committees virtually. And also it's been great to be getting around the Presbytery post-vaccines and seeing so many of you. I've had the opportunity to preach in lots of churches the last 5 months, which has been great to get back into that. And I actually am booking into February of next year already for preaching dates. So we're getting that booked up. So it's exciting to be getting around and seeing so many of you. I also want to let you all know that I did attend the funeral on Thursday for Ann Thomas, the wife of our State Clerk Emeritus, Bill Thomas, and it was a really great turnout. There were some folks, I see Tom Taylor here. Tom, I saw you across the sanctuary, but I didn't get to say hi. There were some folks from Presbytery there, and a really good turnout to support Bill, and please do keep Bill Thomas in your prayers. So Erica, we'll go to the first slide, or the next slide. So what I'd like to share with you today are two areas of research I've been taking a look at recently, and I'd like to share a few pieces of them from you. This area of research, the PCUSA Minister Survey, was conducted by Research Services in Louisville before the pandemic, was meant to be a large-scale research into the well-being of clergy around the PCUSA. And so the data was closed, and the research was completed, or the research was put together during the pandemic, but the data set was closed before the pandemic, which means that this is a good piece of research, but of course things have also shifted significantly for clergy during the pandemic, of course. The full minister survey is in your meeting materials on the website, both in English and Korean. There is also a set that has been translated into Spanish, but we don't have a Spanish-speaking worshiping community in our presbytery. So it was translated into 2 other languages other than English. So I'd like to just share a couple of the slides from this, not the whole, but to talk through a few of the slides that I think are really important to highlight. So we'll go to the next one, Erica. This just to show that of the respondents of the survey, nearly a quarter of people who responded were retired clergy, and many of those still serving in calls. The rest, about 75%, 76%, so we'll say 75 to keep it in round numbers, were in non-retired roles. And of that, 55% were in congregational service, 7% in bivocational service, so ministry in a congregation is something else, specialized ministry, which is what we see a lot of in this presbytery, and then a small group in secular jobs or unemployed, or just not employed at the time. The next slide, Erica. The other thing that I thought was really interesting about this survey is how satisfaction came out as a broad category among clergy. The most satisfied people are our retired pastors. If you're retired, you're satisfied for the most part. Certainly there's things to be dissatisfied with in retirement, I'm sure. But those who are serving in some capacity but retired are most satisfied. The next most satisfied area of clergy are those in specialized ministry, those who are doing non-congregational ministry service, followed by those doing congregational ministry service, and then followed by those doing bivocational service. Bivocational service is, folks find that they're not dissatisfied with it, but it is a hard juggle, doing two things at once or piecing two jobs together. So this is, I think, an important thing for us to notice in this presbytery, because of our pastors in this presbytery, and we look at our clergy roles, we have about 50% of our clergy roles are retired clergy. And then of the remaining 50% of our clergy roles, who are those in active service of one sort or another, only about 50% of those are serving in PCUSA congregations. We have many serving in specialized ministry capacities. So the difference in our presbytery is many of our specialized pastors are serving in the UCC. So we assume those numbers would be similar to those serving in PCUSA congregational settings. But there's something about congregational ministry which is causing more significant areas of stress at this time. Next slide, Erica. The other area that is, I think, important for us to notice is that clergy are tired across the board in the church. And these were some of the categories that came out here in all of this. The next slide, Erica. Also, about 65% of clergy meet with a mentor, a spiritual director, or a coach. But when you drill down into the data, there's only about half of those are doing it on a consistent basis. And so this is where I want to start sort of talking to those of you who are not pastors at this meeting, but those of you who are elders representing congregations. We sent a letter to all congregations from the Personnel Committee about clergy, and I really hope that congregations, personnel committees, and sessions are checking in with their pastors, making sure that there's enough funds in continuing education in the church budget so that pastors can have space to meet with a spiritual director, with a coach on a regularized basis, making sure there's enough money in that medical reimbursement line so that pastors can have time to meet with a therapist. We're in a part of the country where therapists, many go outside of medical insurance. And so people are paying cash in order to see someone and then getting reimbursed at a much lower rate. And so the cost of therapy in our area tends to be much higher than the national average. So making sure that there's enough funds on board, clergy who are able to pull through some of these areas of fatigue and challenge, especially right now at this stage in the pandemic, are those who have a team on board with them, someone who's in a coaching capacity, a spiritual director capacity, a therapy capacity. These are really important areas of wellness for all of us, but especially for clergy. Next slide, Erica. The other thing that was a little jarring to me to see is that about 67% of clergy take their day off, take their Sabbath day. So this is the other thing that I really want to encourage. We should be attending to our mental and spiritual and physical health with at least a day of Sabbath weekly, and that day of Sabbath should be honored. Yesterday, I sent someone an email at the National Church office and immediately got a response back, an automated response saying this person was on vacation for the next 2 weeks and that this was the staff person to check in with if there were any questions. And so I forwarded that email to the other person, honoring the other person's time away. And before I knew it, the first person I'd emailed had responded back during their vacation because of a culture that says we need to work when we are supposed to be resting. So I want to encourage time off to be honored, vacation, study leave, all those things really need to be honored even at all times, but especially right now for clergy. The next slide, Erica. And this does not surprise me. 34% of clergy have taken a sabbatical. And the number one reason why they have not is because it's never been offered. This is my 4th call in ministry. I celebrated my 20th anniversary in ministry this year. This is the first call I've ever had in 20 years that has offered a sabbatical. So I've never been offered a sabbatical, and I will take one in a year and a half when I'm in year almost 22 at that point. That's not unusual for clergy in the PCUSA. One of the things I'm really proud about with PS&E is that we do have a sabbatical policy. I know a lot of congregations have questions about it, and I want to encourage congregations that have questions about it to reach out to your COM liaison or to myself or to David. We'd be glad to talk with you and to think ahead in year 3 or 4 for year 6 when the sabbatical will happen of what do we need to be doing to prepare and start talking about it early and start talking about it often so that it can be supported well by everyone. So just know that that is our policy, and we want to find ways to support you and help you in that. Next slide, Erica. Nationally, 28% of clergy rate their physical, mental, and spiritual health as very good or excellent, which means we have a pretty high percentage that says they don't. So this is another question to ask. Again, questions about, are you having the time you need? Are you finding the resources you need to be able to take care of yourself? What this says to me is that, ministry is very stressful. It takes a toll. It takes a toll on the body. It takes a toll on the head. It takes a toll on the heart. And so finding ways to talk amongst each other and in ways also that are uplifting and meant to be helpful rather than ways that are shameful for people. This is a big one, and it can be a very touchy one. And next slide, Erica. Oh, we'll go back to this slide for just a second. Sorry. Thank you, Erica. I forgot where we would be at the end. So what I want to say in all of this is that, this is not meant to be a downer, this piece of research, but it's meant to be a reality check. I think it's really important to notice that this was taken before the pandemic, which means that clergy have really struggled during the pandemic as well. We've talked a lot the last 18, 19, 20 months across our culture about essential workers. And certainly I think clergy also fall into that area of essential workers, have needed to be really on those front lines, have needed to care for others, and have needed to hold quite a bit during this pandemic. So as we come to the close of this year, thinking of ways to thank, to celebrate those who have been serving in your congregations and in the ministries that you are a part of, and also thinking about ways to build new things for 2022 towards wellness for everyone as we move into this hopefully next phase of the pandemic, where it is a little bit more of an endemic situation, at least in our part of the United States, as it's looking right now. Again, things could shift on us again. So I want to just really raise these issues up and notice them. Next slide, Erica. The other area of research that I've been looking at, which I've found to be really interesting, and I haven't even gotten a chance to talk to Jenny Peek about this yet, but one of Jenny's colleagues at Yale has been a part of this research, is a group called Springtide Research. And this came to my attention because an article was written about them in Religion News Services. And they've been doing research focused on young people in the United States across religious identities, ages 13 to 25. I think this is really interesting research. You can Google it, and I'll drop a link in here after my report. You can actually get the ebook for this as a Kindle download for like $5. It's a really interesting read, and I want to encourage everyone to take a look at it. And I just want to lift a few areas in here for everybody. Next slide, Erica. So one of the interesting things about young people is that there's a serious values gap in what they feel that they value and what they feel that religious or faith communities care about. And so here you can see different areas of value for young adults and teenagers, and things that they feel are of value and where they perceive there to be a value gap between where they're at and religious communities. And so these fall into areas of LGBTQIA rights, gender equality, equity, immigration, income inequality, disability rights, environmental causes, reproductive rights, racial justice, the Black Lives Matter movement, and gun reform. And William Barber, who's the sort of chair of the Poor People's Campaign, wrote an article about this research, actually, and said if you want to, if religious communities want to meet young people, they need to find them in the streets. That's where they're going to find them. And so really another interesting article, and I'll pop that in the chat as well. Next one, Erica. And this is just a sense of, you know, how young people in this study self-identified themselves. The largest chunk is still somewhere on the Christian spectrum, but you'll see that our part of that spectrum, Protestant, is, or clearly identified as Protestant, is in that 16% range, and that really there's multiple religious identities that are going on for this age group. I wish that they had asked young people if they had mixed religious identities, because other areas of research, we know that this generation, more than half of them are growing up in bi-religious households where parents are of two different religious traditions. Next slide, Erica. We're also beginning to get some data out from the 2020 census. And so this is the bigger data about everybody in the United States, the religious landscape. And it looks a little bit like the chart with young people. The difference between these two charts is that question didn't ask for unaffiliated. And so you'll see here that that is nearly 25% of population in the United States. And this is we're beginning to get that census data worked through. And the next slide, Erica. And this is what I think is so interesting. This is at the end of the report on young adults and teenagers, is that they're very interested in looking at faith in what they call a unbundled faith. So unbundling belief from a single source or a single stream, unbundling identity from a single source or stream, unbundling community from one single source or stream, and unbundling practice from one single source or stream. So that really what this is saying is that, you know, many of us see one individual religious community as holding all of these things and being all of these things and not going anywhere else. And increasingly what it is looking at in younger generations is that folks are interested in either picking or choosing or finding communities that fit in these different areas. And so what would it mean as we lead communities of faith and as we lead congregations to lead in ways that don't feel like it's one or it's all or nothing, but you can be with us in one place and that's okay, and be in others in other spaces that might create more openness and more welcome. And last slide, Erica. So I just wanted to offer these more as just some thought pieces for all of you. I realize as we close out 2021, as we move into 2022, we're really shifting, not just from one year to the next, but we're shifting into whatever this next stage is of the pandemic. I wish I had a name for it, but I don't, but I can definitely feel that there is some kind of a shift going on. And just a few themes that I'm seeing is that we continue to need to provide significant support to our clergy. We need to continue to focus on creating open-hearted, welcoming communities. We need to continue to focus on our anti-racism and that work, focusing continually on this cross-generational learning. There's a lot in this report to learn from, and I think would be helpful for everyone. Figuring out how to be integrated and also unbundled in how we are faith communities, and also paying attention to really the next, I won't call it a pandemic, and it's not next because it's already here and we're just not noticing its severity, but the climate crisis and preparation and mitigation for faith communities around that is going to need to be a top priority for all of us. It does not pass my notice that we are a mostly coastal presbytery. Most of our congregations and communities we serve are within 5 miles of coasts. throughout the presbytery. We only have a few non-coastal churches in this presbytery. We need to think about that as a presbytery. We need to start naming that and start considering the ways climate change will impact us, not just now, but think proactively for who will be in our seat of leadership 20, 30, 40 years from now. And how does our faith community need to exist in those spaces? So those are big questions, but it would be faithful to the next generation to start asking them and to start thinking about them now. So I want to just provide some thoughts for you. And as we move into that new year, as we move into where we're headed, and just reiterate how grateful I am to especially the core leadership of this presbytery who's been carrying us through this time, and also to our staff who've been doing so much behind the scenes to continue to make kind of everything sing around the presbytery. So I'm just so deeply appreciative and grateful to God as we close out this year for all the ways that I feel we have been so deeply accompanied